DFS. It is Friday, October 29th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our Week 8 DraftKings podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me, as always, is Jared Smola, and this podcast is sponsored by our partners at FanShare Sports. FanShare curates hundreds of pieces of daily fantasy sports-related articles, tweets, and podcasts to create the most accurate ownership projections in the industry. Those projections can be found in the lineup generator on DraftSharks.com. And you can find up-to-date ownership info anytime at fansharesports.com. Jared, what do you like for cash at quarterback on DraftKings this week?
Yeah, I'm kind of all in on Josh Allen this week. It might be a week where I play him in 100% of my tournament teams, and I'm probably going to pay up for him in cash as well. I love the spot for the Bills at home coming off the bye against the Dolphins defense that Allen has owned throughout his career now. 8.2 yards per pass attempt, 19 passing touchdowns in 7 career meetings. He's also averaging 54 rushing yards and 0.4 rushing touchdowns per game. You know, this year's Dolphins defense is not any better than any of those have been. Miami also facing the 5th most offensive snaps per game. And there's a couple of reasons for that. You know, one, their defense isn't very good. 2, they're a pass heavy offense, which, you know, so they're not bleeding clock when they have the ball. And Miami's also a fast-paced team. The Bills and Dolphins are both top 13 in situation neutral pace. It's actually the fastest-paced game of the week. So you're going to get a lot of plays out of the Bills, I think, on Sunday, which always helps.
Yeah, so, I mean, even if you're not going to Josh Allen in cash, you think you're going to want pieces of this game on one side or another because there's going to be plenty of offense in it. I could tell, you know, not only from where Josh Allen was in our rankings, but looking at your article on DraftSharks.com, I was like, I'm not even going to bother asking Jared what player we should put in the thumbnail this week. I think Josh Allen's pretty safe bet.
Yes.
So I will certainly give a look to Josh Allen. As we know on the show, though, I like to go cheaper at quarterback in cash. I'm going to start my plans with Matt Ryan here at $5,900. Worked last week as a cash game quarterback, 40 plus attempts now in 3 straight games for Ryan. He is over 280 passing yards in each of those 3 games, over 330 in each of the past 2 plus touchdown passes in 5 straight. So, I mean, you know, I mentioned it on at least the Thursday show, and he started out the season terribly against the Eagles. And then ever since then, he's gone back to being Matt Ryan. It was like he watched the film from week 1. He was like, oh, wait a second. I forgot I'm Matt Ryan. I don't have to be amazing. I can just be Matt Ryan the rest of the way. So I think in that range of more affordable quarterbacks, Matt Ryan's floor is more attractive than guys like Carson Wentz. I think it's more attractive than Ryan Tannehill, and Ryan Tannehill is another $700 extra in salary. So that's where I'm starting. And I also like that Calvin Ridley is just $6,600 for me to pair with Ryan in whether it's a cash or tournament lineup.
Yeah, the whole Falcons offense just looking better as they, I think, settle into Arthur Smith's scheme. Talked about yesterday's show too, how they went super pass heavy coming out of the bye. So hopefully that continues. So I like Matt Ryan as, you know, the cheapest cash play I'd go to. I'll throw out Jalen Hurts too. I think, you know, we talked about pretty much every week, but I think even at, you know, $7,200 now, he still makes sense as a cash play. And then Justin Herbert, of course, I'm going to continue, you know, trying to get at least one piece of him, I guess, in tournaments. Hopefully, I think, you know, Austin Eckler's status will, for me, probably determine whether or not I do play one Herbert in tournaments. Yeah, I do think that'd be a pretty significant loss. Kind of sounds like Eckler is leaning towards, you know, being available for this game on Sunday. But we'll see.
So you'd lean away from using Justin Herbert if Austin Eckler is not playing in that game?
I would. I mean, people make the argument that it's a tighter target tree if Eckler's out. But I just think he's such a big part of that passing game. It would definitely lower Herbert's ceiling if Eckler isn't out there.
I could see that. I mean, there's certainly also the case of they would lean even heavier on Herbert. So, you know, I think he's in play, but yeah, I don't think he's a focal point for me this week. So do you have any other quarterbacks that you're liking on the GPP side?
Nope. It'll be Allen and potentially Herbert for me in tournaments.
Yeah, I like the Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley stack here as well, especially with a run back that I don't think is going to be too highly used. DJ Moore will probably be decently used, but Robbie Anderson at $4,700 along with Matt Ryan and Calvin Ridley kind of gives me a low cost trio with upside. Robbie Anderson, this is absolutely the only place that I would kind of bet on Robbie Anderson. And it's not like an every lineup thing or, you know, overweight on Robbie Anderson, but when you're getting this many targets, at some point there's going to be at least a decent game, maybe a big game, but at least a decent game. And at $4,700, I will take a decent game from him. Top 8 among wide receivers in targets over the past 4 weeks, 57th in PPR points. So, I mean, something there's going to be a week somewhere, and this matchup with Atlanta seems like as good a spot as any. So if it does happen, I want to get repaid. Robbie Anderson owes me for some weeks. I think there were even a couple of weeks with an NFL.com team where I started Robbie Anderson over Mike Williams at the beginning of the season that he still owes me big time for. So I want to make sure I get paid if Robbie Anderson has a game at any point.
I'm not sure he can ever repay you enough for, the Anderson over Mike Williams call.
Yeah, that team's still doing fine, so it's not too big a deal, but he definitely owes me. I'm also curious to see the ownership projections on Tom Brady and his wideouts, because I don't think it'll be too high given the other options that we have on the week. And I mean, the matchup's not great, but Tom Brady's excellent. His wideouts are excellent. It's just Mike Evans and Chris Godwin at this point with Antonio Brown out again, so it's not that hard to pick who goes with him. And Rob Gronkowski is down $900 in salary from where he was before his injury. Looks like he should be ready to play. So, that could be an interesting group to put into, a few tournament lineups and see if they can go off.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get to Brady this week in terms. I think it might be a relatively down week for the Bucs offense, just going on the road against a defense that's familiar with them. The Bucs gave Brady trouble last year. Brady was better in the playoff game, so maybe he kind of figured out that Saints defense. But it's not going to be any Brady for me. I do like Godwin and Gronkowski though, as like one-off plays in tournaments.
Running back Cash, what are you playing?
Kind of a tough week for me in cash or running back. Besides Daryl Henderson, to me, he's the lock. And I still don't know how he busted last week in that matchup against the Lions. All the usage was there. Henderson played 88% of the snaps, got 15 carries and 6 targets, and just came up with 9.4 DraftKings points. That was Henderson's first game of the season with fewer than 15.7 DK points. Now he's $100 cheaper this week at $6,500. Gets the game against the Texans, the Rams, 14.5-point favorites, big implied total. Houston 30th in Football Outsiders run defense ranking. So Henderson for me in cash for sure.
Man, that's the kind of play that like 3 years ago you could count on people backing off this week because he let them down last week, and it doesn't happen so much anymore. I'll be curious to see if his ownership level's down. I mean, he was projected for like 22-23% last week, so maybe it'll be down a little bit, but yeah, certainly remains a strong play for all that usage that you've been talking about. I also like Joe Mixon at $6,900, good price for him. It's the top scoring matchup by DK points allowed and by our adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs on the season, and he's had double-digit DK scoring in all but one game this year. Not a whole lot of ceiling games, but there was one 2 weeks ago. So he has shown us some ceiling, and, we know that it's there. The offense is rolling. There will be scoring opportunities. It's a bad defense that they're playing against. I also like James Robinson at $6,600, probably even a safer bet for touches than Joe Mixon. The second best scoring matchup by DK points allowed for him against Seattle this week, 4th by our adjusted fantasy points allowed metric. Robinson's seen 17 plus carries in 3 straight games, and that's 2 losses and 1 close win. So it's not like game flow has been, drastically helping James Robinson lately. He's just a good bet to get touches, and he's atop the league in DVOA right now among runners.
Yeah, I mean, my only concern with Mixon, and I don't want to speak ill of the guy because I love him, but his passing game role has just been so inconsistent. So that scares me a bit. But like you said, the matchup is unbelievable. The 2 other guys I'm considering and leaning towards in cash, Najee Harris, $7,500, 17.2 carries and 8.6 targets over the last 5 games. So even in a pretty tough matchup against Cleveland, I think volume makes him a good play. And then I do think I'll end up using Kenneth Gainwell in cash at $5,000. And I'm not expecting, I'm basically expecting him to play like a Chase Edmonds type of role, like 10 or so carries, but then, 5, 6, 7 targets. And the passing game matchup especially is really good for Gainwell. Football Outsider says Detroit dead last in running back coverage. So I think I'm going to end up playing him in cash at 5,000.
I certainly think he's a fine guy to have in the pool for cash running backs, as long as you're not looking at Kenneth Gainwell and saying, well, that's a smash. He's going in my lineup definitely, because he's just not a lock for all the touches. We saw last week after Miles Sanders went down, they weren't like, okay, Kenny, you're in charge now. It was like, all right, Boston Scott, you're on the field, and both of you guys are going to have touches.
Totally agree.
On the GPP side, I'm chasing touches here more than I'm worrying about low ownership. So I'm mostly going to go with the guys that we've already talked about, maybe a couple of other guys that we haven't discussed in that pool, DeAndre Swift among them, but nobody too sneaky. I think if I want to go cheap here, though, I'm going to reach just past Kenneth Gainwell and take Michael Carter at $4,900. Jared, how many of Mike White's targets went to running backs last week after he stepped in?
44% of them. And that was with Corey Davis healthy, and he's not going to play on Sunday. So, yeah, I mean, Carter should be busy.
Yeah, Michael Carter is going to be busy. And at 4,900, I mean, I don't need him to have a big game to make sense of that number.
So I like the idea of pivoting off Kenneth Gainwell in tournaments. I do think he's going to be popular. Again, he's not going to be a workhorse, so that as risk, there's a chance he busts if he's not going to get 20 touches. I like Zac Moss as the pivot off Gainwell at $5,200. Again, I just think this Bills offense, could put up 40 points on Sunday. Maybe Josh Allen doesn't get all the touchdowns, and maybe Zac Moss gets one or two. He's outside of Josh Allen. Moss is the clear goal line back in Buffalo. Also averaging 3 targets per game over the last 4 outings now. So, he's been involved in the passing game. Miami 27th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running back. So I like Moss. And going back up top, I like Nick Chubb in tournaments. He was a full go in practice today, not on the final injury report. So, that suggests that he is potentially ready for as much as Cleveland wants to give him. Maybe Dearness Johnson just plays the Kareem Hunt role and Chubb's volume doesn't change. Even in that case, he could still pay off at $6,800. But I mean, what if Chubb gets even half of the Kareem Hunt work, an extra 2 targets and all the goal line work, then he could just be a total smash at that price tag.
Right. The downside is that he goes back to being Nick Chubb. The upside is that he's Nick Chubb plus some Kareem Hunt. And they're like, Dearness Johnson, that was very adorable last week. And we were glad to have you. But, the older brother's back. So it's time to step aside.
Yeah.
I will definitely be talking about Nick Chubb on the FanDuel side of things as well. Wide receiver for cash. I'll start with Calvin Ridley because I already, talked about Matt Ryan. And even if I don't play Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley is squarely in the plans in that pool of players because of that positive salary. He, Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, I think are all attractive in the mid 6K range, along with Deontay Johnson, just a little bit above at least Ridley and Allen. I think he's a little bit above Chris Godwin as well. But for Deontay Johnson, 10 plus targets in 4 of his 5 games. So he's just among the best bets for target volume in that range. And, as I just mentioned, we have lots of guys that you can count on for a good number of targets down there.
Yeah, I think all those guys are pretty good bets for double-digit targets on Sunday. I like Chris Godwin. I think I believe he's the cheapest of all those guys at $6,400. No Antonio Brown, like Evan says, the Marshawn Lattimore matchup. So I would expect Godwin I think he's the odds-on favorite to lead the Bucs in targets on Sunday. Michael Pittman, I like at $5,300. Just 7 targets over the last 2 weeks for Pittman, but that was in a blowout against Houston and that rainy, windy game in San Francisco. Before that, in the 4 games before that, Pittman had 7, 8, 12, and 12 targets. That first 12 target game came against Tennessee, who he gets this week. This over-under has been climbing all week. It's up to 51 the last I saw. So it should be a high-scoring game. Should be more passing volume from the Colts. And Tennessee 31st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers.
Yeah, and his salary is down $100 from last week. Second straight week that it dropped by $100, even though he caught 4 balls for 105 yards last week against the 49ers. So I like Michael Pittman as well. I think also Jacoby Myers at 5,100 is interesting on the other side of a Keenan Allen lineup. If you're playing Keenan Allen at wide receiver, GPP, like I said, I like the Falcons stack because I think the ownership is going to be low and because I think the upside is high with Robbie Anderson at $4,700. Checking the Bucs. I mentioned that in the quarterbacks. So I want to see what it looks like for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin as well for this side. I would imagine Godwin's going to be very highly owned. I'll be curious to see Mike Evans in particular coming off the 3 touchdown game, but still more expensive. And then I'm also curious to see the Chargers ownership projections here. With or without Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert, I think has some potential to kind of come in lower than he really should be. And you alluded to it earlier, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, even if Austin Eckler is there, it's pretty concentrated in terms of where the targets are going. So it's not hard to project where the ball goes if it's a big passing day.
Yeah, I think we've all just kind of forgotten how good this Chargers offense is because they were just on bye and they struggled in the game before the bye against Baltimore. But I still think they have as much upside as any offense on the slate. Mike Williams, full go in practice all week, so the knee injury is not a concern anymore. So I like that call. I like the Calvin Ridley call with potentially Robbie Anderson as a little game stack there. I like AJ Brown and Michael Pittman as, a stack together. I think more people are going to play their running backs in that game, but I think both those wide receivers have big upside. I like all the Bills wide receivers, Stefon Diggs, obviously, but I think Emmanuel Sanders. I think Cole Beasley is going to be the guy that gets the biggest bump from no Dawson Knox. I think you're going to see Beasley basically on the field for every pass play at least, so that's going to help him. Then I'll throw out Devontae Smith too. The volume has been there for most of the season. Jalen Hurts has added some downside some weeks. Man, I just like this Lions matchup. I think Detroit secondary is just so bad. Football Outsiders says them 27th in Football Outsiders pass D. So if you give, Devontae Smith 8 to 10 targets against that secondary, I think he has a chance in a big game.
Yeah, I was kind of reminded last night and this morning, how many targets Devontae Smith's been getting lately. He's been doing well in that area. So I'm not sure that a huge game is coming, but it's possible. Those are definitely some players to play and not watch: Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, and Robbie Anderson. If you have lineups with those guys in, just wait until afterward and see what the results are. Do not watch it build.
Yeah, watch Justin Herbert instead. That'll be a lot more fun.
That's right. A lot better, unless it goes the way that last year's Patriots game did. But I would bet strongly against it. Tight end for cash, where are you starting?
I'm going back to RSJ, Ricky Seals-Jones. He's only up another $100 to 3,800. Here's where he ranks among all tight ends over the past 3 weeks. He's 6th in targets, 7th in catches, 8th in receiving yards, 7th in touchdowns. He's 3rd in expected PPR points. He's 8th in actual PPR points. So he's been a top 8 tight end by any metric, and he's still just $3,800. Denver 19th in Football Outsiders tight end coverage ranking. So it's kind of a neutral matchup. I think the volume is just too strong for RSJ at that price.
And Denver is just stronger at corner than it is, much stronger than it is at inside linebacker. They're pretty good at safety as well, but there's room to work that short middle range of the field against the Denver defense, which has been struggling in general lately. I also am starting with Ricky Seals-Jones. I think Dan Arnold, you mentioned on the Thursday show, he also makes some sense here because of his $2,800 salary, and he's going up against Seattle, which is the 6th friendliest tight end scoring matchup by our adjusted fantasy points allowed. So at 2,800, if we get a guy that catches 4 balls and does anything beyond that, it's a good day. And, anything more than that is just a bonanza.
Yes. Always love a, playable $2,800 tight end. Really opens up what you can do with the rest of your lineup. Especially
when it's a tight end who's really a wide receiver masquerading at tight end. That only helps.
Yep.
GPP, What do you like?
So Rob Gronkowski, we mentioned, $4,600. I almost want to say he's in play in cash at that price. I mean, it's risky, I guess, in his first game back from injury, but he opened the season with 29 and 19.9 DK point games. He has, with Travis Kelce off the slate, he has as much upside as anyone, even Kyle Pitts, I think. So I like Gronk in tournaments. I'm going back to Tyler Higby too. $4,500. Usage has been awesome. He is 2nd among tight ends in both red zone and end zone targets. He's really underachieved in the touchdown department so far for the usage he's been getting. And, the Rams should put up 30 plus points on Sunday against Houston. So there's big touchdown upside for Tyler Higby.
Yeah, I think if you're building a bunch of tournament entries, you spread it around among Tyler Higby, Rob Gronkowski, and Dallas Goedert in the same price range, because all those guys could let you down, or they all could score a touchdown or two. So I agree with all the players in that range. Tyler Higby, we've talked about the red zone stuff. He's got 10 red zone receptions, more than Robert Woods on the season, just 2 touchdowns. By comparison, Cooper Kupp has 9 touchdowns among 16 red zone receptions. So there's just upside there, and the matchup is helpful this week. I think Mike Gesicki at $5,000 is also kind of in that range, a little bit more expensive, so you have to get up to him. Not quite as attractive as those other guys, but probably going to come in lower owned than those 3 guys in the mid 4K range too.
Agreed.
Defense, Jared, what's your favorite?
I really want to pay up for the Bills, and they're expensive at $3,300, but
not even that expensive though.
I was gonna say, I mean, they should be a $4,000+ deal. They are leading defenses in DraftKings points per game at 12. They've been a great real life defense. They put up 22 points in the first meeting against Miami. They're at home, big favorites. Dolphins have the 3rd lowest implied total of the week. So, it's more expensive than I like to pay up in cash games, but I really think that the Bills are worth it if you can get there.
Yeah, and they're going to be highly owned, but it's just I would love to see how the algorithm got to that point of pricing the Bills the way that they are, because they're not. They're like 8th among defenses in price. It's the league's best defense by multiple metrics. The Dolphins are a positive matchup for defense scoring. And even the past 2 weeks with Tua back and going over 400 total yards, they've amassed 3 turnovers in those 2 games. So it's not even like they stopped turning the ball over when Tua came back. They turned it over 3 times back in week 2 against Buffalo. Of course, most of that game was Jacoby Brissett, but last year, week 17, that game, of course, where the Bills had already clinched and pulled the starters early, Miami turned the ball over 4 times in a blowout loss in that one. So, I mean, I think we both expect Buffalo to control this game, which is only going to add pressure to Tua in the offense. I think there's huge upside. I don't even really care so much about the ownership level. I'm going to try to get to them as well, but there are some cheaper options if you need to.
Yeah, I mean, Washington to me is tempting just because they're $2,100 and they've been horrible. But I mean, it's Denver. It's a fine matchup. I think they're probably not going to kill you. So I'll consider Washington in cash if I really need the savings. The other D's I'll consider in tournaments: the Bengals, who get the Jets, San Francisco, who gets Justin Fields, and the Bears. Cleveland, Ben Roethlisberger. That's a matchup I want to attack all season. And then Jacksonville, again against Geno Smith. I think for their price, I believe they're $2,400. Some upside there just because of the quarterback matchup.
Yeah, Washington's matchup with Denver, the Broncos, are the 4th best matchup for team defenses by our adjusted fantasy points allowed. So that's also a positive matchup. You said Washington's been terrible, but we don't really care whether they've been good or not. If you can get one good fantasy week, you can play a bad defensive game and still have a good fantasy week with some big plays. I also want to throw out the Colts at 2,600 as a tournament-only defense because I think that they'll be extremely low-owned because we know that the Titans can score points. They just threw a bunch up against the Chiefs. The Colts are a talented defense, though. It's a negative scoring matchup with Tennessee. So, not something that I'm expecting to work out, but priced low enough that it can make sense. Some savings on the Bills. And most importantly is that difference, that differentiating ownership level where if the Colts score a touchdown on defense or get a couple of sacks, not a couple, if they get 5 sacks and really just limit the Titans, then you're getting a boost versus the rest of the field. Ryan Tannehill has taken the 6th highest sack rate in the league this year. And we've seen some turnovers. They're in the middle of the league in that category. So, they're not coughing it up a lot, but they're also not stingy with the ball.
Yeah, Colts are up to 3-point home favorites now. So, if the game flow goes in that direction, Tannehill has to throw it more than usual. That kind of gives you the upside for the Colts, D.
That's right. That's going to do it for this Week 8 DraftKings podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com now to get more player recommendations. If you're a DS insider, you can check out Jared's cash game picks as well as top GPP options. Then you can check out, and then you can see the top GPP options from Corey Bushland. Got lost on my notes here for a second. You can also mess around with the lineup generator to build your own lineups with the help of the DS projections and fan share ownership projections. For more discussion of DFS and other formats, you can also join the free Draft Sharks Discord. Find the link to do that in the description for this podcast. If you are with us here on the stream, stick around. We will take a brief break and then fire up the FanDuel side of things. For Jared Small and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us. It is Friday, October 29th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our Week 8 FanDuel podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaff. With me, as always, is Jared Smola, and this podcast is sponsored by our partners at Fanshare Sports. Fanshare curates hundreds of pieces of daily fantasy sports-related articles, tweets, and podcasts to create the most accurate ownership projections in the industry. Those projections can be found in the lineup generator on DraftSharks.com. And you can find up-to-date ownership info anytime at fansharesports.com. Jared, now that we're on the FanDuel side, is it still Josh Allen leading things off at Cash QB for you?
Oh, yeah, it is. Easier to play Allen here on FanDuel, I think. Always easier to fit in those expensive quarterbacks. So, Buffalo, the highest implied total of the week at 31.75 points. Allen has owned the Dolphins throughout his career, really. Miami ranks 26th in Football Outsiders pass defense, DVOA, this season. 23rd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. This is also going to be a fast-paced game, but both these teams ranking top 13 in situation neutral pace. So a lot of plays, a lot of passes, a lot of fantasy points for Josh Allen, I think.
I just imagine the Dolphins collectively sitting there like, man, I'm not afraid of Josh Allen. Somebody's like, he's right there behind you. Go like that. they cannot be happy to see Josh Allen coming because he has owned them in his brief time here, especially last season. I think if you do want to save some money, Joe Burrow at $7,800 also makes sense over here. Bengals are 13th in the league at 57.3% neutral pass rate since T. Higgins returned in week 5. So they opened the season looking like, and acting like one of the league's most run heavy offenses, but that has shifted as Joe Burrow's gotten further away from his knee injury, as T. Higgins got healthy. He has thrown 2 touchdown passes or more in every game so far, 3 touchdowns each of the past 2 weeks. And he's got Jamar Chase or T. Higgins available for stacking if you like to do that sort of thing in your cash lineup.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and not play Jamar Chase in DFS again this week and get burned. So that's going to be fun.
Yeah. He's one of those guys that you want to call a sell high, but he's just awesome. I mean, you watch him, it's like the reason he's outperforming his usage is because he's awesome.
He's not going to keep this up, but he is awesome. His volume is growing largely because, as you said, Cincinnati's throwing it more. So he's going to be great the rest of the way. One of these weeks, though, he's going to, just put up 70 yards and no touchdown. That's when I'm going to win a tournament.
There you go. It's definitely coming down some, but I certainly don't think he's going to crash anytime soon. GPP side, I think Joe Burrow's also in play here because I don't think that he's quite going to crack that top shelf of quarterbacks, even though I think he's got as much upside as most other guys on the slate. And you can use either Higgins. Chase is going to be highly owned, or you could toss both of them in to try to differentiate. T. Higgins, by the way, $1,900 cheaper than Jamar Chase on FanDuel, despite averaging more targets per game so far.
Yeah, I like Higgins on both sites actually as a value this week. Josh Allen for me in tournaments. Justin Herbert, I think, is an option. Hopefully he gets Austin Eckler back. I'm a little intrigued on FanDuel here too by Trevor Lawrence. Coming off a bye, gets a bad Seahawks defense. He's been running more, which always helps. Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault are both priced pretty nicely. So that's kind of the cheap stack I would consider if you want to be able to, pay up, get some stud running backs, maybe play Derrick Henry. I think Lawrence and 1 or 2 of his pass catchers might make sense.
I could see doing a little bit of that. My concern there is that it's just a sluggish, ugly game with lots of James Robinson. And I wonder if Trevor Lawrence has the ceiling to pay off.
Seattle has faced the most plays per game, though. They're giving up a lot of plays, which obviously helps.
That's true. I'm also curious to see the ownership on Matt Ryan and Calvin Ridley over here, because they're certainly going to be in consideration for me everywhere. Running back for cash, Jared. Derrick Henry's down where he was 11,000. Now it's just 10,500. So does that mean he's going to be in all of your lineups?
Well, I tried playing him last week and it didn't work out. So I'm not playing Derrick Henry in cash this week. So you all probably should. He's probably going to go for 203. I'm going to go down to Daryl Henderson, $7,700. All the usage was there for him again last week. When healthy, he has been a workhorse back for the Rams. Had 15 carries and 6 targets last week. I think he has a shot at 20 carries this week with the Rams. Big 14.5-point favorites against Houston. The Texans 30th in Football Outsiders run D. So I like Daryl Henderson. The cheap play I like on FanDuel at running back is Elijah Mitchell, $5,800. He's averaging about 16 carries in his 4 healthy games this season. He has 27 of San Francisco's 31 running back carries over the last 2 weeks since coming back from injury. So I just think he's a good volume bet against a Bears defense that's going to be without Khalil Mack. I'm not sure is Akeem Hicks going to play on Sunday. I know he's a big part of that run defense. If he's out, that'd be an upgrade for Mitchell if he's out.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot scary in that Chicago defense at this point. So, yeah, I like Elijah Mitchell. I have him down here. I think Kenneth Gainwell is in play, but again, not somebody that I'm tripping over myself to get into lineups. And I'll throw out DeAndre Swift at 7,900 just because I think even without the full PPR scoring, he's probably still a little bit underpriced for his level of production week to week. He's delivering whether it's half PPR or full. So those 4 guys that we just mentioned are the ones that I have down here. On the GPP side, this is where I'm not playing Kenneth Gainwell. I don't like the ceiling or what I expect his ownership to be. And honestly, it's more so the ceiling than the ownership. I guess anybody could score twice, but I don't like Kenneth Gainwell versus other guys that I can have in the similar range. And you talked about one of the other guys at a lower price that I would prefer over Kenneth Gainwell here, and it's Zac Moss.
Yeah. The Bills should put up a ton of points on Sunday. So Moss has nice touchdown upside. He's for the most part, he's been running ahead of Devin Singletary for the past 4 or 5 games now. So I like Moss in tournaments. I like Damian Harris in tournaments here on FanDuel, and I kind of want to play him on DraftKings. I don't love the price on DK with the full PPR. I think he makes more sense here on FanDuel. But Harris has 14 plus carries in 5 of 7 games this season. He is tied for second in the NFL in carries inside the 5-yard line. So he's getting those touchdown opportunities. Teams going extremely run heavy against LA. Just the way the Chargers play defense, they kind of invite you to run. And teams are doing it. They're doing it with success. The Chargers 32nd in Football Outsiders run defense rankings. They're 24th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running back. So I definitely expect a run heavy game plan from New England on Sunday with, Harris as the focal point of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like those guys. I have Damian Harris down. I think Elijah Mitchell is going to make sense here too, because I don't think he's going to go very highly owned. And I'm very curious to see if Nick Chubb stays short of double-digit ownership projection, because if he does, I think he's going to be a smash in this matchup. Even though, Pittsburgh has played the run tougher, I mean, it's Nick Chubb. If he's back, there's no Kareem Hunt. He's going to get lots of touches in this game.
Yeah, let's stop talking about him now. I'm just saying single digits.
That's right. Wide receiver for cash. I think even if you're not playing Josh Allen for some reason, Stefon Diggs looks good across formats at $7,300. I mean, the last year version of Stefon Diggs probably would have been 8.5K by now.
Yeah, just a crazy price. And I mean, he's been relatively disappointing so far, but all the usage has been there. He had the big game prior to the bye week. And I got some numbers here from Underdog's Hayden Winks. The Dolphins are near the top of the league in man coverage rate. They play a lot of man coverage. Stefon Diggs has been top 9 in yards per route run against man coverage, both last year and this year so far. And this season, Diggs has a 51% target share when defenses are playing man coverage. That's where Allen's going, because Diggs is open against man coverage. He's such a good route runner. So, I love Josh Allen, and I think, he's going to, carry Diggs to a big game here too.
And we don't even have to say Stefon Diggs is going to rebound at some point. He did it against Tennessee before they went on bye. So, I mean, it's also Stefon Diggs. We don't have to really make a case for him. So, yeah, definitely going to have some money on Stefon Diggs, especially before the game, so I can watch him and just enjoy scoring those points. He at that price, Calvin Ridley at 7K, and then Michael Pittman at 6,600, I think are all attractive, all going to be in that pool of consideration for cash wideouts.
Yeah, I like Chris Godwin too at 7,200. I think he's a good target bet here with Antonio Brown out, with Mike Evans dealing with Marshawn Lattimore. I think Godwin should kind of be the focal point of the passing game for the Bucs on Sunday.
Well, he and Mike Evans, I don't know if either one's going to be the focal point.
Yeah, again, I just think Evans has tougher matchups. I would bet on Godwin out targeting him in this game.
Mm-hmm. On the GPP side, I think those guys will be in consideration. I don't think either one's going to get too dominantly owned in those projections to be out of consideration. And I think Tom Brady will be low if you want to consider playing him. It's the Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley, Robbie Anderson stack that I'm looking at too. And I think in addition to being on the lower ownership side, that's going to allow you to put some expensive pieces around it, get some better running backs in the lineup, kind of ensure those touchdown chances along with the volatile wide receivers. I mentioned it on the DraftKings show, but Robbie Anderson, top 8 among wide receivers and targets over the past 4 weeks, but 57th in PPR points, 14th in not expected fantasy points, because we're talking about Robbie Anderson in 2021. So it should have fantasy points, what he should be scoring on the usage that he's getting. If Sam Darnold remembers how to play quarterback at any point, there's going to be a good game coming. Yeah.
So love Calvin Ridley. Interested in Robbie Anderson, I'll say, and I'll probably end up using him in a lineup or two. I'm going to go back to Keenan Allen as well. $6,900 on FanDuel here. He's underachieved versus usage so far. The Patriots also just lost their slot corner, Jonathan Jones, for the season. So, I think Mike Williams will be fine on Sunday as well. But, the matchup might dictate Keenan Allen, kind of being the focal point of the passing game on Sunday.
Keenan Allen had a stretch last year too, where he wasn't scoring touchdowns and everything else was fine. And people were like, what's wrong with Keenan Allen? And then all of a sudden he started scoring touchdowns again. So Keenan Allen's somebody to just bet on in general. Even whenever there's a dip, you buy the dip with Keenan Allen.
Agreed. Like Bitcoin.
There you go. Tight end for cash, Jared. What are you favoring?
So Kyle Pitts again comes in as the top value for us at $6,800. So I have no issue if you want to go there. I think his price is probably going to get into the 7,000 starting next week, even potentially. So Pitts is in play. If you want to save some money, I think Dallas Goedert is a nice value at $5,900. All the usage that we wanted to see in that first game without Zach Ertz was there last week. 93% of Philly's offensive snaps. Goddard was 7th among tight ends last week in expected fantasy points. If that continues, he's gonna pay off this price tag more often than not.
Yeah, he did only see 14.7% of Eagles targets, so I would like to see that number come up, but there's certainly room for that to happen. And even if it doesn't happen consistently, it could happen in any given game. I have no issue with either of those guys. I also want to throw out Pat Freiermuth, though, way down at 4,900 if you want some savings and somebody who's going to be involved. 7 targets, 7 catches the last time out. We mentioned not somebody to count on yet, but that salary makes him attractive, and no Eric Ebron this week. Ebron's not been a big factor. But if he's not playing at all, that can certainly only help the snap share and opportunities for Freiermuth.
Exactly. Yeah. We talked on yesterday's show. The targets were there in that last game, but the pass routes were still kind of underwhelming. With Ebron out now, the pass route should come up, potentially like into the 70s or 80s. So yeah, I like Freiermuth quite a bit.
Especially a tall guy that's not too far away from old Ben, so he can actually see him and reach him with his throws.
Exactly.
PP side, what do you like?
Tyler Higby. This guy has a 2-touchdown game coming. He's second among tight ends in both red zone and end zone targets. The Rams have the 31.5 point implied total this week. There should be plenty of touchdowns to go around. I'm gonna keep playing Higby in tournaments. It's kind of no reason to get off him. All the usage we want to see is there.
I have to decide between Tyler Higby and Dalton Schultz on my FFPC main event team, and I'm very worried that no matter which way I end up going, it's going to be the wrong way, which absolutely it could be. It's one of those when you're deciding between tight ends, you could make the right decision based on all the factors that go into it and just have it wind up being wrong when one of them has Randall Cobb's game from Thursday night.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's Schultz if Dak Prescott plays. If Dak's out, your decision's made for you.
Even so, I mean, Tyler Higby's got the better matchup. I don't know. It's going to be tough. Anyway, I like Tyler Higby.
I thought you were saying you're not. I mean, if Dak's out, you're going Higby, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, good.
Tyler Higby, I like here as well, regardless of what I end up doing on my own personal team, which people don't care about, I'm sure. Down to 5,300 in salary here. So, I mean, even lower than he was last week when he already looked attractive and wasn't terrible by any means. Second best scoring matchup for tight ends by FanDuel points allowed. He has seen the same number of end zone targets as Higby as Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods have, has only scored 1 touchdown on those, has more red zone targets than Robert Woods, has 10 catches in that range, has only scored on 2 of them. So there are more touchdowns coming. This is definitely a game in which they could start coming. So I want to have some Tyler Higby heading into this weekend. Jared, defense, what do you like on FanDuel?
Yeah, Bills here, just like on DraftKings. The Bills aren't as big a value on FanDuel here, but it's also easier to fit in a higher price defense on FanDuel. They're $4,700 here. They exploded in the first game against Miami. They're 14-point home favorites in this one. The Dolphins had the 3rd lowest implied total on the week. So the Bills are just in a perfect spot.
Yeah, I thought it fit her in. I thought you were turning into Larry the Cable Guy for a second. I certainly have no argument against the Bills. They're $4,700. The Rams at $5K. If there's money left over against the Texans, are certainly a good option as well. I think if the salary matters, the Bucs at $4,200 are a decent starting point against the Saints. The Saints have not been a smash matchup, but there's definitely potential for them to be in any given game. And I think for a GPP lineup, the Chargers at $3,900 against Mac Jones are interesting, and the Jaguars for $3,500 against Geno Smith.
Yeah, I like Jacksonville, and I like Cleveland too. Home favorites against Ben Roethlisberger. There's upside there.
Yeah, Cleveland is without Denzel Ward and might be without Jadeveon Clowney. I don't think that really changes things, but it certainly alters the defense a little bit.
Yep, for sure.
That's going to do it for this Week 8 FanDuel podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com now to get more player recommendations. Kevin English has your cash game picks. Corey Bushland has your top GPP options. And then play with the lineup generator to build your own lineups with the help of the DS projections and FanShare ownership projections. For more discussion of DFS and other formats, you can also join the free DraftSharks Discord. Find the link for that in the description for this podcast, wherever you might be consuming it. For Jared Small and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us.